Okay, so this is going to be a little different from what I usually make. This is going to be what I call a mini review. Sometimes it might go against the name because it might go past what would be normally a review, but I'm going to try to do this for every game that I conquer, specifically games I've never beaten. What a mini review for my definition is going to be is pretty much just briefly talking about the story and gameplay and the things I like about it, the things I hate about it, and overall what I think of it and what I recommend it to specific people. Okay, so in terms of the story, this is going to be the part I'm going to suck describing the most, but essentially the plot takes place after the first game over summer vacation, and there's this new organization called, I believe, Gospel, and to my knowledge they don't have anything to do with the WWW organization. They're just pretty much another group of people that are trying to conquer the world. Pretty simple stuff, but similar to the first Battle Network game, it breaks up into multiple chapters where it's mainly trying to focus on each antagonist that is connected to the main organization, and at the very end you fight the main leader of them all. However, the ending for this is a little bit different from what the first Battle Network game does, but that would spoil it, so let's just say that it does something a little bit different how it reveals it. In terms of the mechanics of this game, it plays very, very similar to the first one, if not almost exactly the same, but there are some changes. First of all, there's the hub world, or, well, maybe not the hub world, but just the real world. You pretty much move around, you go through different areas to see what place you can jack in or not, and probably one minor complaint I have about this game is that it's a little cryptic at times. Like, what happens is, if you press L, they give you a hint on where you need to go, but that's usually your only type of hint. How do I describe this? You know, like RPGs in the 80s, where they're extremely cryptic, like you have to figure certain things out, and sometimes they don't even tell you, and even if they do give you a hint on it, it's just so ridiculous that that's actually what you have to do. I think one of the most infamous moments of an RPG of this example is Dragon Quest II, where there's a part where you have to go to a tower that you went through earlier in the game, and you're given a hint about one of the keys you need in order to beat the game, and you have to go to a very specific tile on a very specific floor and interact with that specific tile, and then you get the key. I remember I looked online for that part, and it actually wasn't in the same spot. I can't remember if it was a different floor, I don't know, but I was playing the Japanese version, and I don't know if they changed it, but that would have been really scary if it would have gotten worse. But anyway, this is early 2000s. Usually they became less cryptic with RPGs over time in terms of having to figure out where to go or what to do. 80s were really bad about it. 90s was kind of bad, but for the most part they weren't too bad. With the Battle Network games, by the 2000s they weren't too bad. They were way less stressful than the 80s or 90s. But in Battle Network, it kind of feels like I'm playing an RPG from the 80s, but being more generous on the hints. It really is crazy how frustrating this game can get on where you need to go. And just like with the first game, I was able to barely beat this game without having to look online in terms of the main story. And yeah, it was pushing it. If I had to think of the most stressful part in the game, which I'll have to go into that later, but these are pretty much the main areas you go to. And I will say, I can't think of what video game series it reminds me of, but it's one of those games where with every sequel you go to some of the same areas you've seen before in previous games, like the AC/DC town, but there, of course, are exclusive areas, like the Okoden Valley, which is Chapter 2 for this game. It's really nice when they have new areas, just because, I don't know, it gets kind of annoying when you see some of the same areas over and over, and luckily, when it comes to the main net world, it changes in every game, I think, at least for the first 3. Okay, so probably my favorite open world area to explore is the... what is it called exactly? Netopia, I think? Even though this was probably the most stressful area in the entire game, it's definitely my favorite for many reasons. There's 2 different areas. There's the plains, which I think it's Chapter 5? Chapter 4? It gets a little confusing. I'll explain later. But Netopia is supposed to be you going to a different country, and I don't know how I'm able to show it because I already missed the chapter, but I did take pictures, so I might be able to show that, probably. But probably the weirdest thing about the chapter, once you get to this chapter for the first time, I don't know why it's this specific chapter, including the Plains chapter when you're trying to get back, but it feels like the localization, when they were localizing this in English, it seems like they just kind of almost stick with the exact same script that was in the Japanese version. How do I describe this? In the first Battle Network game, I don't ever recall swearing in the games. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just kind of comes off really shocking to see cuss words in a game that's mainly marketed towards children. Again, I have pictures to show, but I'll try to figure a way out to show that later on, but it really shocked me, some of the elements they added, like a lot of religious references and a lot of questionable things. Again, it doesn't really bother me too much in the sense of, like, oh, it's bad to have that in the game. I just find it very weird that for this specific point in the game, for like a few hours into halfway into the game just kind of changes what's okay and what's not okay. And it's even weird because after you finish the Plains chapter, there's no more swearing anymore. And I think that's what makes it even weirder, is that 1 second there's a lot of swearing and then it just stops. It's very weird. Okay, next up I'm going to go into pretty much the main part of the game, which is the net world, / the combat parts of the game. So first I'm going to describe this because I never talked about the first Battle Network game, but like I said, it plays mostly the same. So I'll pretty much show just the first type of battles you encounter, and I'll have to describe everything really quickly. So probably my favorite thing about the Battle Network games is the combat system. One complaint I usually have for RPGs is just how repetitive it can be, and even if it's not really press the A button, I'm the kind of person that likes to play games where you move around a lot, and I will say this is something I rarely see in RPGs outside of, not counting games like Xenoblade Chronicles, games where you kind of move around. I mean by when you encounter an enemy and you go to a different battlefield. I've seen some games like it, but this one, I've never really seen any other game like it. And even the creators revealed that when they were developing this game, there really wasn't any type of game like it, and if it did exist, it either is extremely obscured and did not do well at all because of its obscurity, or it just executed poorly, because this is it's definitely unique. So pretty much how the game works is that you collect battle chips, and you mainly collect battle chips by either finding them in the overworld or beating enemies, or you just buy them in shops. And at the start of every battle, depending on what ships you have equipped, it'll randomly throw out any type of chip to start out with. Normally it starts out with 5, but in this game, the armors that you equip will give you an extra 2. But anyway, how it works is, for example, if I pick this chip that has a code T, I can't really use anything else except for this one. This is something that's new that's added to Battle Network 2, which is, I guess, the asterisk chip cards, in which how these work is there's no code letter, so if I press this one first, I can pretty much pick any other chip card, which is really nice having this just because it is kind of annoying because there's a total of 26 different codes, so it becomes really difficult on what codes that you're able to combine with, because you can get a lot of cool chip cards, but the idea of the game is you don't want to have too many letters because you can only have 30 chips in total. So your idea is that you want to have no more than 5 total letters in your file, just so you can be able to add more onto it. The idea is, for example, with T, I can't pick anything else, nor can I do with R or G. However, with J, I'm able to use any other card that also has J, including the asterisk one. There's also another concept where if you have 2 of the same type of card, but they're both different code letters, you can still use those, but you can't use anything else, including the asterisk card, I believe. So this is pretty much how the battle works. You pick your cards, or you can add, which, depending on pretty much how it works, is you take some of the chips that you got, and if you add them, you lose those chips, but then you're able to permanently have more chips at your disposal for the next turn. So what's interesting with the combat in this game is that you can freely move around on this grid, but you can only move on your color spaces. But there are chip cards where you can take the enemy chip spaces as well. Pretty much how it works is that you're under a time limit to wait until you can be able to get more chips. Like right now, I'm now able to have access to more chips. That's what the custom gauge is for. Now you do have a default attack, which is the Mega Buster, and I'll get into that really quickly. Oops. At the end of every battle, it varies depending on how well you do in the fight. You might get money, or if you do really good, you get a chip. And depending on what chip you get is mostly just what enemy you defeated. To what I've seen, it doesn't really go by the last enemy you kill, it's just whatever enemies that were on the field, and then it goes from there. Wait, what's... Oh, really? Okay, well I guess I can explain this now. I don't know why it's doing this. So one thing interesting about Battle Network 2, in the first game, there were different armor types, which simply how it worked was the fire armor would make you resistant to fire attacks, but you would be weak against water attacks. In the second game, they expand upon it. In this one, it's the same thing as before, where, like, with the wood custom, you're resistant to wood attacks, but you're weak against fire attacks. But they also added additional things. When you use a charge attack, depending on what type of armor you equip, you can actually have a specific chip that you can use every time. Like with the aqua armor, the charge shot will always be a bubbler attack. Or with the electric armor, the charge shot is always a zap ring. This one is the twister. However, one thing that's very strange in this game that I found out towards beating the end of this game is that you can only have 2 armors at a time instead of having all 4 of them in the first game. I don't know why it's like that, and also depending on which one you pick, you don't really have a choice on which one you can pick actually, you're just given to it at random. Because when I looked online, the first armor that they got was the wood armor, while for me the first one I got was the electrical armor. Now you can actually level up these armors depending on how much time you put into using them in battle, but it takes a really, really long time, and by the time you're at the end of the game, you're lucky to max out both armors. And pretty much what he's explaining really quickly is that you can only have 2 at a time, and by the time I got to the end of the game, there wasn't really a point for me to exchange them, because if you do, you lose all your progress for the other 2. So pretty much whatever 2 armors that you get, you might as well get them. And I don't really know how long it takes to get a new armor set. Like this, for example, it's just completely random. But I do think it's a good expansion from the first one. It had a concept and they expanded upon it. And the last thing that they added was that you can be able to have 2 additional chips. Okay, so for the level up system, this is also very interesting. I haven't played that many RPGs that does this, but you don't get experience at the end of battle. You mainly just get only one thing: money or chips, or in this game health, and I'll get to that later. So if you see level 98, it's like, well, there are level ups, right? Well, not really, kind of. Throughout the game you collect HP memories and you collect power-ups. The power-ups are specifically made for these 3 stats. When you collect HP memories, you, I think, level up once, and when you collect power-ups, you level up, I think, 4 or 5 times. The level up really doesn't mean anything. The level just kind of represents the total number of HP memories and power-ups you've collected. The highest level is 100, and I've never gotten to level 100 because it doesn't really tell you exactly what power-ups and HP memories you found. So if you play throughout the entire game and then you missed a couple, unless you have an extremely good memory, it's going to be very difficult to find them. But yeah, here are the 2 styles that I have. In terms of which one I say is the best one, honestly, I think, at least for these 2, they're both equally good. The charge shot is way faster for this, and the bubbler can attack enemies from behind an object that it's trying to get behind, whether it's an enemy or a rock. With the electric armor, the only problem is that it takes longer to charge, but it can paralyze the enemy, which can buy you more time until your gauge is full. Okay, so for the 3 stats: attack, rapid, and charge. In my opinion, I've never really liked the stat system in the Battle Network games because it just feels very two-sided. Attack makes sense, it increases how much damage you can do for every shot. However, for rapid and charge, it's one of those things where it's kind of like just a random example, like the Shin Megami Tensei games, where it's very two-sided. You don't want to level up attack and magic at the same time. You kind of just only want to focus on one, and that's it. Because, well, how do I explain this? With rapid, it goes by how fast you can hit the B button. With the charge one, it goes by you holding the B button. And the thing with this game is, it takes a long time for these stats to actually get good. Like with the charge shot, you don't even have the charge shot at level 1. You have to get to level 2 just to use it, and it's still crappy. It's not until level 4 is when it's actually decent, and once it gets to level 5, it's extremely good. So the problem is, my recommendation is obviously level up attack, but then choose between either rapid or charge. Because if you try to balance it, because there is a chance you might not find every power-up, or you might not really care getting every power-up. So, what I did in this game was I leveled up attack, charge, charge, just so by the time I was about 2/3 done with the game, I was maxed out with attack and charge, and then whatever power-ups I could find left, I could just put it on rapid. Rapid is good, and I do think it can be just as good as charge in the first Battle Network. However, this game kind of makes charge better, because when you get the different armor sets, the only way to use those special attacks is by charging. And it doesn't do that with rapid, it doesn't really change anything. So because of that, you really want to have your charge maxed out as soon as possible so you can use the armor set at their full potential. This is also the same thing in network transmission, where they made charge shots way more powerful than compared to the traditional Battle Network games, and it makes, even if you have max rapid, it's very pitiful in terms of power compared to charge. So personally, I recommend focusing on attack and charge, but at least in the first Battle Network, I feel like they're equal in their own right. Okay, so now I'm going to be talking about some of the pros and cons in this game, but mostly I'm just going to talk about the things that were added to the game that were good. Thought I heard something. Well, anyway, so I'm going to talk about the things that were added into this game that was nice, that wasn't in the first game. First, they added the new sub-chip, Sneak Run. Well, to be fair, sub-chips were added into the second game, but they're also a network transmission. And I'll explain why some of the sub-chips exist, but personally the most useful one is Sneak Run. It can pretty much let you avoid any enemy battle. For a decent amount of time, it's pretty much like Repel. They do say that it's only from weak enemies. However, even enemies that are actually pretty strong, I guess it just goes by what level you are, but at least from my experience, I've never had a problem encountering enemies while having Sneak Run activated. It's extremely nice because, especially for this game, you're going to be moving around in the net world a lot, so it's great being able to just, if you really just don't feel like fighting any enemies, you can just simply use Sneak Run, and although for the first few hours it is a bit pricey, but once you get to a certain point where you get more money, it's a lot easier to get, and then you start getting upgrades to increase your capacity on how many sub-chips you can hold, so it makes it a lot easier. Now the next positive thing I want to say that they did in this game, and I had to check just in case if they actually had this in the first game or not, which it'll happen in a second until, okay, it's out. So here's the next thing I'll show that they added into this game that's really nice. Because these were complaints I had that really were frustrating in the first game. Okay, like this for example, I hate these enemies. So, in the first Battle Network, unless you had an escape chip, which that was already kind of annoying to use to begin with because I would like to have mostly offensive chip cards, so that's why I wouldn't really have any recovery or runaway chip cards. So most of the time in the first game, I just had to deal with fighting enemies most of the time. You couldn't run away. However, in this game, you press L, and you can have the option of running away. And 9 times out of 10, you can actually successfully run away. And so for those two things, it does a great job. I'm glad that they add these two things because it made encountering enemies and avoiding enemies just so much easier. But those are probably the two main things that they fix, and that's great. But similar to Dragon Quest II to the first one, although it did fix a lot of things, it also added some new complaints that almost kind of gets to the point where it doesn't even matter. I won't really be able to show this because it might take a while, but see how your health worked in the first game was, at the end of every battle, let's just say your health at max is 300 and then it goes down to 200 after you finish the battle. After the battle, your health is back at max. And I actually really liked that because I didn't have to worry about getting low on health and then having to heal every battle or two. I'm sorry if I'm not really talking, it's just, that is one thing about this game is, you have to focus really hard, but it's going to be hard for me to show it, but what I'm trying to say is, in the first game, you always got your health back at full health at the end of every battle. In this game, it doesn't. It's more traditional. That explains the reason why there is full energy and mini energy. Now, one complaint I had about the first game was that I hate that you don't get money at the end of every battle every time, because how it works is it's extremely difficult trying to collect chips in the Battle Network games, because you have to worry about also getting money. In order to get enemy chip cards, you have to do really good in the battles, and there might be a specific chip you're trying to get, but the best chance you can get is if you get an encounter that has just that specific enemy only. But most of the time, you're always going to get a lot of enemies, and it's going to make it a lot harder to fight them. So why does this have to do with the health? Well, it was already frustrating enough in the first game, but in the second game, they made it worse. Because if your health is even down by 70%, there's a chance you might just get health at the end of battle, which might sound nice, but all that means is that you just wasted your time. You didn't get money, you didn't get any chip cards, you just got health. And most of the time, I could simply heal with my sub-chips, but you might take too much damage in battle, and then you just get health at the end of it. And I really hate that. It makes grinding in this game, because, yeah, even though there's no experience, which means you don't have to worry about grinding for experience, you still have to worry about grinding for money a little bit, plus grinding for enemy cards. In fact, I would say about 1/3 for both the first Battle Network and this one is just grinding. This game took me about 30 hours, which to be fair, that's pretty short for an RPG, but it's on Game Boy Advance, and I've played other GBA RPGs that usually take around the same amount of time, like Golden Sun, Pokemon, the Mario and Luigi RPG game. So I really hate that addition. But probably my biggest complaint about this game, and I don't think this was in the first game, or at least it wasn't even a fraction as bad. In this game, I actually looked up the release dates for all the games, and the first game was released, I think, it was early 2001, and this game was released in December 2001. So I think this game only had about 8 months of development, which is not that long, especially the fact that Battle Network 3, 4, 5, and 6 would all come out of pretty much around a year for every Battle Network game sequel. December 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. Except for Battle Network 2. This game had the least amount of time in development, and it actually explains a lot. Because, see, the problem is, there is a lot of filler in terms of main quests. There are 2 instances where you pretty much have to keep going back and forth to the same areas over and over again. And to make an example, one of the areas you have to go to is Yumland, but you can't go there because you don't have a high enough licensed Battle Network license. So you have to go to the Marine Harbor in order to get it. But the problem is, it's still too early for you to get it because you haven't done any side quests yet. So then you have to do 3 side quests, 2 of which you literally just have to backtrack to areas you've already been to, and what's worse is after you finally do the 3 side quests, you then take the test in which one of the 3 missions you have to do is literally just backtracking throughout the net again, trying to find 2 specific, they're not called navies, they're just, I don't know what they're called. But once you finish that, you can finally go to a new area. But if I remember correctly, shortly after you go there, you then have to backtrack some more. And I think the part that is still fresh in my head is the second time the game does this. After the first filler main story, it kind of does a lot of... Like, you mainly go through Netopia, you go through the Plains story, you actually do a lot of original areas. But then, once again, there's a lot of padding by just backtracking to areas you've already been to. And I think the part I hate the most is a part where this guy says that I need to have these two items in order to make a material so you can break a certain crystal. And one of the two is called a heat data. Your only hint is that you have to go to a program that creates flames. That's pretty vague, considering that means you have to explore the entire area of the entire overworld, and you have to go to every program or remember. And I was able to remember because that was the first thing that came to mind, but you just have to know that you have to not go to that area, but talk to one of the navies about it, and he doesn't give you a request, he just says something which gives you a hint on where you need to go to an area you've already been to, and then you talk to him, and then you go back to that area, and then you have to go back to him again, and then you go back to him one more time, so then you can finally get the heat data. It's just... And they do this multiple times. So what I'm mainly saying, my biggest complaint about this game is the backtracking is really bad. I don't think it was in the first game, and I don't think the other games have this problem, just because I think the reason why they did it was because they had less time working on this game. So in order to pad it out to make it as long as the first one, they just simply kept repeating you going back to the same areas. Okay, I think that's mostly what I wanted to talk about with this game. Sorry if this review is really bad. This is my first time trying to actually mention a lot of things in the game, and not to mention, even though I've talked a little bit in some of my videos, it's really hard trying to constantly talk while recording something. Usually it's a lot easier when I don't feel like someone's hearing me or making a video that other people will see. It makes it a lot harder for me to just talk more smoothly about stuff like this. Usually talking about this stuff is not a problem. I guess I'm just a kind of person that I can't read from a script, nor do I'm able to talk consistently. I just kind of prefer going with my own flow. But this is practice. So overall, what would I give this game overall? My scoring system is kind of different than a lot of people, which that's the case for most. My score for this game is about a 6.5, although I really want to give it a 7. I give the first game a 7. A 6.5 isn't bad. It basically means that this game could have been a lot better, and I do like it. I like the story, I like the characters, I like the character designs, presentation. Really good. The combat is really fun. I like that they fixed a lot of things in the game from the first one, but I hate that they also added new flaws or just didn't fix certain flaws that were also in the first game. But hey, I did hear that the third game is the best one in the series, so that should be interesting. Okay, I think the video is going to reach its maximum, so that's pretty much it.